This is API Case Files.
Hear this message. Tune this channel. Like E.T. said, phone home.
Hello and welcome to the December 2019, January 2020 episode of API Case Files. I'm your host, Marsha Barnhart. API Case Files provides an opportunity to examine and discuss reports and observations of unidentified aerial phenomena and the associated interests surrounding the study of the phenomena. We like to gear our show to other investigators and investigative organizations, but of course many API Case Files listeners are simply interested in our examination of UFOs and anomalous experiences and incidents. So this is the show for you. Hopefully, you will subscribe to our podcast and mention it to like-minded persons. Also, we would like to hear from you regarding your interests and experiences. Contact us through our website, aerial-phenomenon.org. We'd enjoy hearing from you.
This is API Case Files.
This episode will include a drill down into a recent UFO report out of Medina, Ohio. There were aspects of this case that point up some common recurring elements in UFO witnesses that I feel bear closer examination. Also, our director, Paul Carr, gave a presentation at the November 9th D.C.-Baltimore area annual Mysteries of Space and Sky conference. So he'll provide a brief on his presentation and on the conference in general. Additionally, we'll hear from Savannah Dollison, our Oregon-based lead investigator. She's going to talk about some psychological aspects that often prevent UFO witnesses from reporting their sightings. Now, let's take a deep dive into a case out of Medina, Ohio. It's a single witness case. A young lady was driving into Medina to pick up her boyfriend after work. It was a Saturday night around 11:15 p.m., August 24th of this year, 2019. The witness was driving a familiar road on a familiar route, but the familiar at one point quickly became uncharted territory.
I saw this big craft, and it was like, from a distance, it was like glowing blue. And I was trying to figure out what the heck it was, because I've never seen anything like that. There's like a small airstrip near Medina where Cessnas come in and out all the time. And I knew it wasn't a Cessna. There's no way. And as I drove under it, I could see it was in the shape of a V, a perfect V shape with 5 lights underneath, big white circular lights. And that was the point I realized it wasn't a plane, definitely not a plane. And I have no idea. I've never seen anything like that before. I have no idea where the blue light was coming from. It was just like surrounding the entire thing. It was going really, really slow, but I heard no sound. There was a car in front of me, and they slowed down to look at it too.
Now, did you have your window rolled down so you could hear?
Yeah, because I was I was smoking.
Okay. What size would you say this thing was from your location?
Okay, so I have seen in broad light of day C-130s fly low over my house when they're doing their missions and whatever. So approximately that size, but it was the shape of a V. There was no cockpit, there was no body of a plane. It was just like this V shape.
Now, it was late at night, so how clearly could you discern aspects of this flying V? Could you see how thick it was?
Okay. Yeah. So like on that night, there was no clouds, really bright sky. I mean, it was a great star night. Like if you were into telescopes and stuff, you would have been out on Saturday. And like I said, this thing was glowing blue. I don't know where the light was coming from, but like when I was under it, I could see, because the like blue offset of the light, the body of this thing. I don't know what color it was because like it was night, obviously, but it was definitely a dark material. And when I was like approaching it before I went under it, it looked really, really thin. Like the silhouette or the profile was really thin. That's what I'm saying. Like there was no cockpit. It wasn't a plane. It's possible it could be some kind of drone that I don't know about, but it's not a civilian drone. If it was just too big.
Did your automobile act odd at all?
No, I didn't notice anything.
All right.
But then there's like some trees. So like as I was driving on, it got to a point like it was so low I couldn't see it because of the trees. So after I went past and under it and whatever, I don't know what it did. I don't know where it went.
And so you can't really give a fair guess of how high it was, having seen Cessnas come in to airports nearby you. It was bigger than a Cessna coming in for a landing?
Definitely.
It was about the size of a C-130, huh? Because I know those planes well. I was in the Air Force. You're talking the size of about a C-130 cargo plane.
Yeah, wing to wing. Yeah.
Okay.
Very large.
Now, the object didn't change shape or color?
No, it just had this blue glow. I mean, it had these white lights underneath, but it didn't, like the lights underneath, I should say, they didn't blink. The glow that was around it didn't blink or fade or anything. It was all like constant light, which is another thing because, you know, planes, they have those indicator lights or whatever where they're blinking red.
Yes.
There's none of that, so.
Okay, and you couldn't discern any windows or portholes or exhaust ports or anything?
No, like the side view of it was like pretty flat. And when I was underneath, all I saw were like the lights. That's why I said like it could be some kind of military drone, but I don't know. I've all the drones that I've seen, they have like that straight across wing. It's not V-shaped at all, and those usually fly really, really high altitude. So I don't think it was a drone. I'm not sure what it was.
And there were no markings? There were no markings on it?
No, not that I could see, just the lights underneath. So if you imagine a V, there was a big light at the vertex and then two on either wing. And they just look like giant, like recessed ceiling lights, like perfectly circular, white, really bright.
Oh, I see. They were inset.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you notice if there was any other aircraft in the area?
I noticed there were some planes going, like probably commercial jets, like 30,000 feet, like way, way up there, but there wasn't anything close to it. I know up in Medina, you'll see helicopters all the time. I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, I didn't see anything else like even remotely close to the craft when I saw it. So
I checked air traffic control chatter during the time frame of the witness sighting. Nothing showed up. I searched the archive of Flight Radar 24 for the period in question and found no notable traffic in the area. As the witness surmised, a very large government drone doesn't typically fly low like that, nor are they silent and slow-moving. If the government has this capability, of course, we would have no way of knowing. I contacted the local police, and they had no reports from any citizens in the area that night. The search for any local or national media reports on other witnesses turned up only this. One report was filed with the National UFO Reporting Center, Newfork, that did show another person witnessed a large V-shaped object over the skies that same night at 9:40 p.m., about an hour and a half earlier, near Cleveland, which is 25 miles north of Medina. I traveled to the exact area of this sighting and met with the witness in person. We discussed her experience at length several times, once as we were overlooking the general area, and then a second time as we drove along the exact roadway and had her point out where she had first sighted the object, where she drove underneath it, and where she lost sight of it approximately. That roadway, US 42 West, accommodates two-way traffic, but allows for no area to pull off the side of the road. It is 28 feet wide. Now, the wingspan of a C-130 cargo plane is 132 feet tip to tip. It would be a very large object seen from that roadway. A few houses are scattered throughout the corridor, both left and right of the road. For the most part, the outskirts here are flat fields, but there is a point where a strip of mature trees line the roadway. Those trees were only about 30 to 40 feet tall. And now, did it cross right about here and it disappeared over these trees?
Yeah, and then as I kept driving, I was trying to look back, but you can see the tree line kind of obscures your view.
Now, these trees are not that tall.
Yeah, so it was really low.
This point here, you lost track of it. It was that low.
It was so low.
And it was about the size you think of a C-130 wingspan, which is 132 feet.
It was huge, yeah. The whole thing was bright blue. Blue, blue, blue. Very vibrant blue around the whole thing.
And it was like an aura that surrounded the entire
craft.
vehicle?
Yep.
Did you see it shimmer at all?
The blue was really consistent, kind of like a misty, it dissipated. There was a real thick blue aura, but then there was a gradient where the light kind of dissipated, you know? But the white lights underneath were consistently bright white and didn't blink, didn't change at all, just really, really. But I didn't see those white lights until I was underneath it.
Okay. And it made no sound that you could hear?
No, I mean, something that low, if it had been a Cessna or a C-130, you would hear it. You would hear it. It was so low and so quiet and just gliding so slow. It didn't seem like something that low should have been able to go that slow in front of you.
Just above tree height, made this object approximately 80 to 100 feet off the ground at this point, which is why it disappeared from view behind the tree line during the encounter. After speaking with the witness, I knocked on doors of the houses lining that part of the roadway. Only 3 residents were home or bothered to answer their doors, and all 3 were unaware of anything unusual that night. I found this witness a sober-minded, mature, forthcoming, delightful young lady who just happened to find herself on August 24th approaching the intersection of perfectly normal and off the hook. But as it turns out, off-the-hook experiences happen sometimes to certain people. And during my original telephonic interview with the witness, I delicately probed into any other past experiences she might have had. And she cautiously relayed several that she had kept quiet for fear of seeming weird or abnormal. So I steered us into this area because I feel it's important that investigators of anomalous experiences gather all the facts available, regardless of how bizarre or unbelievable the experiences are. This is important data that can't be left on the table. To be valid and helpful going forward, all experience has to be incorporated into the totality of the phenomena.
The first thing I did when I got home, I made a MUFON report, just because that's my inclination.
Right.
But I tried I tried to search up V-shaped craft.
Yeah.
And I found one that was like very, very similar, but
Okay.
the only difference in the image I found, it was like not glowing.
Now, you said you've had this interest since you were a kid. Has anything anomalous happened? Unusual events in your life that still to this point don't quite seem explainable or seem odd?
Yeah, actually, but I don't want it to like taint the record of what I saw. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I can understand you thinking that, but we are finding as we get and gather information, it is very common that when people report a UFO or a strange experience, it isn't the first time. And it's very common for people to have multiple experiences they just don't talk about. And it used to be that UFO reports, we only gathered the information on the exact incident that was being reported, but we've begun to correlate more information. So I would be happy if you would share that with me, as strange as it may seem. I mean, I can tell you some strange things that have happened to me, so I know strangeness abounds out there.
Okay. It sounds weird. And nobody ever wants to believe me about it, but when I was about 7 years old, I remember being in my room and seeing like this red light come in through the window. And I opened up the blinds. And I saw like these little guys outside, like these little men. And the next thing I know, they're like coming into my bedroom like in a single file line. And then it's weird because like, I'm not really sure what happened, because the next thing I know, I was like in this black tank, and there was all these people in there sleeping and floating around with me, but I was like awake for some reason. And then the next thing I know, I see this light above me in this tank, like people looking down, and I'm like paralyzed. I'm just like floating around, not swimming, and I wasn't in water. I don't know how to explain it, but they were telling me that I had like a kid or something, even though I was only 7 years old. And there was this little girl, like a toddler, standing next to me. And the whole thing makes no sense, but that's what happened. The next thing I know, like I'm back in my bed. Could have been a dream, maybe not. Now that this has happened, I'm thinking maybe not. That's the only other thing.
All right. Now, did you have any markings on you, or have you found unusual markings on you from that time on?
Nothing that I've noticed, nothing alarming.
All right. Have you found that you've had unusual coincidences in your life?
I haven't really had any weird coincidences.
All right. Have you felt kind of special, or have you felt afraid?
I wasn't afraid either time, really. Like, when I was little, I wasn't afraid. I don't remember being afraid. And then when I saw that craft, I didn't feel afraid. Thinking about it is kind of creepy, just because I don't know what it was. But it's not like I'm living in fear.
Now, have any of your other family members ever talked about a similar experiences as yours, either seeing a craft or having unusual visitation or strange dreams or things of that nature?
My mom said when she was a little kid, and they lived over in Hinckley, Ohio. I don't know if you know Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
That's about 40 minutes from where I live now.
Mm-hmm.
She said she was playing outside with my aunt, my uncles, and they were all outside on the teeter-totter. And she said this giant UFO just came over the trees, and then that my grandma came outside and started yelling at him to come in the house. So, like, everyone on my mom's side of the family had this UFO experience in the 70s in Hinckley, Ohio.
Uh-huh.
But she hasn't told me anything else. I know how it sounds. I believe me, I know how it sounds, but
Well, it doesn't sound that weird to me because this is my bailiwick, and you would be surprised. It is more common than not. When I speak to a person who has had a sighting, when I ask them these questions, they will go, oh, wow, now that you mentioned it, and then they'll remember just 2 or 3 incidences that they almost kind of put away in a little box and it didn't get triggered until this.
yeah, I could see that. But like my whole family did see that, and then the thing that happened when I was a kid, like that could very well just be a dream. But what I saw on Saturday, like I can say 100% that was a real thing. I wasn't under any drugs or drunk or anything. Totally random freak occurrence.
And you hadn't had any strange dreams prior to that or after that, just up to this experience, the 24th?
I did have a strange dream about a month ago that I was in my room, and in my dream, I dreamt I woke up and there was like a short little alien in my bedroom, and my boyfriend was sleeping next to me. So I was like trying to wake him up, but I couldn't move. And I just chalked that up to sleep paralysis, but I don't know.
Now, what did this creature look like?
Not like anything like people would say on like TV or shows or whatever. It was like maybe 3 feet, and its head was little. It had a really little, like, narrow head. Kind of like, I'm trying to think of a vegetable maybe to compare it to, like a cantaloupe if it was squeezed a little bit. And it had like light gray skin, but really little eyes. So I don't know. But the thing is, when I saw it, I got really scared, and I wanted to wake up my boyfriend in my dream, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't scream. And like when it noticed I was freaking out, it like got right in my face and started shaking its head really fast. I don't know. I know how it sounds. It sounds weird, but that's honestly, that was what happened.
Did that creature look like those that visited you when you were 7?
When I was 7, like their heads were bigger. That's why I'm saying this. The one I dreamt about or whatever, it had a much smaller head, like proportional to its body. It was a very small, petite thing.
Did you get any telepathic messages either time from your 7-year-old experience and your 27-year-old experience?
Well, when I was little, I don't remember them saying anything. I just had like the information. So I guess when I was little, it must have been telepathic when they were telling me, like, this is essentially your kid, and that you can't be with her and you won't see her again and stuff like that. But the most recent time, I didn't hear anything, and like all it was doing was just standing in my room near my bed. So that's why I think like that one could have just been like a sleep paralysis.
Okay. Now, when it said that was your child, you saw your child? Was it human looking or what?
Yeah, very human looking, just like a little toddler. And it's weird because like they were really happy, just like a little happy kid. It wasn't alien looking at all. It was just human looking.
And as a 7-year-old kid, how did you reconcile that in your mind there and then?
I thought it was a dream because at that age, I didn't have the internet. I didn't even really know about anything like alien wise or UFOs, because that must have been like 1997. So I guess I was pretty isolated from that stuff still. So I thought the whole thing was just like a weird dream. And then after that, I would have these nightmares about being in like a box of water.
In this box of water, were you submerged and you could breathe, or were you just floating on top?
Yeah, it was like a substance that I could breathe in. Everyone was like floating in it, you know, like, but I say water because their hair was moving like it was in water. Their clothes were like flowing. Everybody was kind of just sleeping in there though.
They were submerged in there and they were asleep. They were in a sleep state in a liquid.
Yeah.
And they were a bunch of them. They weren't in individual little cartons. They were all floating around in a vat, are you saying?
Yeah, it was like this big black tank. There wasn't any light in it. The only reason I was able to see is because there was like some kind of hatch or a door at the top. When I said like people were looking down in it. Yeah, and everyone was just free and loose. There was like all kinds of people. Like I remember like a middle-aged man, an older woman, and like some teenagers. But I don't remember seeing like any like little kids like I was a little kid. It seemed to be mostly like older people.
And they had their eyes closed and they were sleeping?
Yeah, because I couldn't get any of them to like notice me or look at me. They were just all like sleeping.
And this substance you were in was buoyant? Like water was buoyant, but you weren't floating to the top?
I couldn't feel it. I could breathe normally. Like I said, everything was like flowy, like if it was underwater. But I didn't feel any substance to it. Like there was no weight to it. I couldn't really move, so I don't know. It didn't at all feel like I was submerged in water. It's just like if I was in an air tank somehow that had water effects.
Okay. When you looked up and you saw something looking down from the hatch, were you able to see faces of what was looking at you?
No, because it was dark and the light was coming from behind them, you know, so they were like blacked out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? The light source was like directly behind them. I couldn't tell.
They were backlit. Do you remember how you got into this area?
Yeah, like my memory is broken. I just remember seeing them outside, seeing them come in my room, being in that tank, and then them talking to me about my kid, which didn't make any sense to me at the time, or really even now. But I don't remember how I got there. I don't remember how I got back. I'm like missing bits. I don't remember like being really that scared about it, which if that would have happened to me now, I think I'm pretty scared.
Mm-hmm. And your dream that you just had last month, that would have been what, like July?
Mm-hmm.
And were you fearful in that?
Yeah, that was scary. Yeah, that was scary because I looked over and I just saw him just standing there. And my heart started racing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
And then it got in your face?
Yeah, well, so the process was I woke up and I feel like there's somebody there, and I look and there is somebody there. And I get really scared, and I'm like in my head, because I try to be, you know, do meditation, be mindful. It's like, why am I actually afraid? This isn't threatening. So I switched to like, okay, I'm not going to be scared of this thing. And then as soon as I did that, it jumped in my face and started shaking its head really fast. And that scared me again. And then I went right back to being scared.
And then what happened?
I don't know. I snapped out of it. I woke up. My heart was going like 1,000 miles an hour.
Uh-huh. So when you woke up, it wasn't actually there?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it was like a dream, like a sleep paralysis or something. Yeah.
Did it shake its head violently side to side or up and down?
It was weird. It wasn't like somebody shaking their head, no. It was like somebody shaking their head erratically, like having a seizure, like really, really rapidly. Uh-huh. And it's not even really a good comparison to say like a person shaking their head. It shook its head so fast it like blurred. Like my eyes couldn't track it. It's a weird detail, but yeah.
Have you talked about this stuff with your boyfriend?
I told him both times, but he gets kind of mad. He doesn't like to talk about it or hear about it, really.
Do you know why?
I think it scares him. Yeah, I think he's just afraid. Like, any other topic, if he doesn't want to talk about it, he'll just be like, yeah, okay, But, like, if I bring it up, if I talk too much about it, he just gets kind of mad and quiet. And then he'll be like, I don't want to hear about this. A fear response, maybe.
Those of you who are UFO and anomalous experience researchers and investigators have probably heard similar accounts of spouses and partners who have a fearful aversion to this topic, of oddly vivid dreams that can be recounted in stark detail 20 to 30 to 40 years later. It is certainly possible that this witness is recalling simple dreams. It is possible that this witness experienced a not that uncommon hypnagogic state known as sleep paralysis, lucid thoughts and hallucinations brought on at the threshold of sleep. But I would submit that also possible is that these were not dreams, that these may have been actual experiences at a different state of consciousness induced by a phenomenon as of yet identified, something unexplained that asserts itself on its own terms, displays common features when it does, and gives rise to a multitude of odd, bizarre, inexplicable manifestations. As researchers and investigators, it's important to uncover these odd reports, to listen intently, to keep an open mind, to not cherry-pick input, to not minimize, censor, or avoid the accounts from otherwise sober-minded, sincere citizens who at some point experience their normal life fade out and the phenomenon fade in. Data, input, information, these provide no answers, but they provide a platform for us to pose better questions. Meanwhile, the case of a large, blue-auraed, V-shaped, low-flying silent object seen August 24, 2019 over Medina, Ohio, is closed as unidentified.
This is API Case Files.
Why do so many UFO witnesses feel fearful of reporting their sightings? And if they do report, why do they so often beg off when asked to supply additional information regarding the specifics of their sighting? I'm going to discuss this subject with Savannah Dollison, our lead investigator based in Oregon, so stay tuned for some psychological perspectives on this perplexing and enduring aspect of the UFO witness. Next on the agenda is a discussion with director Paul Carr on his recent presentation to the 2019 conference Mysteries of Space and Sky. What did you think was most important for you to get across to the audience there?
I had a sense there's generally people who've been into the topic for a long time. Okay, and I kind of had that sense before I got there, that it was going to be people who were veterans of the UFO field with differing takes on it. What I wanted to do was just give them my take. That's all I wanted to do, and communicate it in a clear and hopefully friendly way that people would take as not as a attack, but as a just, hey, look, let's consider what can be done, what should be done. But I'm going to get real. I'm not going to just talk about airy-fairy philosophy. I'm going to talk about how I really think it should be approached. And that approach is, as you know, is a very sober, matter-of-fact approach. and looking for what the facts are and not pushing it much beyond that. And so I didn't talk about aliens from outer space or ghosts, extra dimensions, or anything like that. I talked about, here's some cases, here's what we learned from those cases. There's still a lot of things we don't know, and it's okay not to know. I think that maybe was my number one message. It's okay not to have a definitive conclusion coming out of a case, but it's not okay to come out of that case without all the information you can reasonably extract from it. And that is really where we want to get to. And we want to share that information across the community, the research community, and make that available to everyone. And I think a lot of other people are saying the same thing. It just needs to be said more and more in a way that is helping people understand that what we're looking for when we go into investigate a case is not a smoking gun proof of some pet theory, but we have some humility. We recognize that we don't have a good theory. Nobody does, and that we're just going to go in and try to find what information we can. And in most of the cases, there's not going to be that much information, and that's just how it is. So I highlighted some cases that I thought had some aspect of it was really, really high quality. My point was pick some cases that had, at least in some respects, unusually good evidence.
What were the cases that you felt were important to highlight to the audience that kind of embodied the work we do?
I did briefly go over some of the types of identified flying objects that we get all the time. Lens flares, balloons. I talked about one of the first cases I worked was when a guy took a picture of a piece of spider web. He thought it was a rocket streaking across outer space or something. I showed him a very clear case why that was not something out very distant from him, very close to him. And he was actually quite happy to find that out. But not everyone is. Sometimes you say, well, we're absolutely certain what you saw was the planet Venus. They're not happy because they thought it was a life-changing experience. So I picked some cases, all of which I had personally worked. So I didn't actually, as you know, Justin Bamforth was there, and he presented some information about one of the cases that you worked, 12001, I think it is, the famous Men in Black case. I did not say anything about that because he pretty much went over that.
His book was good. I read that book. He sent me a complimentary copy after we did our interview. And I think he probably did the absolute best job of completely detailing that case that anyone has. That 12001, the entire thing, he did a fabulous job.
So I stayed away from that case for that reason, because Justin had already done all that could be done with that. I focused on cases that I'd personally worked that I thought had, at least in some dimension, really good evidence. Now, before I did that, I talked about, as I mentioned, some of the classes of things we get that are identifiable. And I didn't dwell on those. And then I went right into the cases. Now, one of my favorites, actually, which is 15029, which is a photographic case, but it does have two witnesses who saw the object. So it's not just a picture. Anytime you get just a picture and the photographer says, I didn't see it, but there's the picture, that's at least a yellow flag, if not a red flag. Right? It almost always turns out to be a lens flare or something like that. But this was a really superior photographic case. He had a photographer who knew what he was doing, had a really nice camera. He had his camera mounted on a very good quality tripod. He shot in the best format, which is RAW format, raw format, which is what we want all our photographers to shoot in if they're shooting stills, but almost never do they do that. And he shot a 30-second exposure of the sky, had no intention of shooting a UFO. He was trying to get the space station streaking across the sky, which he did. He did successfully capture that. So the location, the date, and time are known. I have the files right out of his camera, so the chain of custody is rock. And we have two witnesses who saw this object. Now, he misinterpreted it. He thought it was up there because the space station was in the same part of the sky that he was looking at. He thought it was up there at the space station. That would be an easy misinterpretation to make. But he he did see it, and he got, even though it's a very, very small image, he got a very good quality image of it because he used a wide angle lens, and so I went into some depth on the images that we have of that, but I identified the stars that are nearby, and I was able to measure the exact size, the exact angular size of the thing. And it's kind of a donut-shaped illuminated object, and it appears very clearly once, and it's probably at least several other times in the image. And from that, I was able to calculate that it wasn't moving that fast relative to its own diameter. We don't know how far away it was. And that's the thing about a lot of these cases. You don't really know how far away the thing is. So its absolute size is not known. All you know is it's a relationship between its size and its distance. And if there was a naval base in that direction, but if it was over the naval base, it was absolutely huge. So probably not there. Maybe somewhere between there and then. So we don't know what the object was. It's not highly strange, but it's strange enough to be considered unidentified. But the quality of the photograph is about as good as I've ever seen and maybe ever will see. So I wanted to highlight that one dimension, very good quality photograph, but not highly strange. Its movement was not bizarre or impossible, and so on. And the next case I looked at was a case that I worked in 2013, and it remains a favorite, not because the case is such a great case, but because there's another case and possibly even other cases that may be related to it. It's in an area where there are a lot of secure government facilities. It's very interesting. I didn't tell the audience that I thought the aliens are landing. I said, here's some government facilities in the area. This is not very far from Washington, D.C. It's between Washington, D.C. and Camp David, which it's in Carroll and Frederick counties in Maryland. And I described what the witness saw, which is at first a very bright light, then a very large, as she described it, a building in the sky, and how we tried to explain it and didn't quite come up with a satisfactory explanation. And then I went on to from that case to another case, which is also one of my best photographic cases, even though it was shot with a cell phone, shot not very long after that. And it was, I think it was about 3 weeks after that. And it was in Eldersburg, which is not far from where the first case happened. And it's a similar shape. The analysis shows that it's probably quite distant, probably many kilometers away from the photographer. So it's very large. And given all the very large error bars we have in these cases, we can still conclude that these objects were large. And this again was a 2-witness case. He saw it. It wasn't just a photograph that came out funny. And he took several photographs of it. We have the exact photographs he took. We know what camera he used. It was a cell phone. And we know exactly where he was standing. I mean, down to the foot. And we know what direction he was looking in, down to the degree. And we know the weather for that day. We know a lot of things. So we were able to look at that photograph, which is just like a little funny white smudge, but it's actually one of the best UFO photographs I've ever seen. And I wanted to show that audience that it's not about having a Hollywood picture that, Hollywood flying saucer in front of you. It's about what the evidence is telling you. So I showed them a blown up version of that. It's kind of fuzzy, but it looks a little like what our witness in the other case saw, the 13020 case. And in fact, I showed it to her, and the primary witness in that case, and she said, yeah, it looks very similar to what I saw, which I was surprised because one was a daytime, one was a nighttime, one was very, very far away. One was probably quite a bit closer. And there was also a case in Pennsylvania around the same roughly time that looks similar. And we had another case. We didn't get a shape, but we had a bright light a little further west in the Frederick County, and around that time as well. And also, as I think you worked this case, Marsha, there was a triangle in December of 2012, and it is more or less a classic black triangle. I spent some time going over the area where he's actually driving around that area several years later, where he saw it, trying to figure out if there was anything there that was unusual. And there is a facility not far from there that is conspicuously secure and underground. But other than that, I don't have any idea what the government uses it for. But it's impossible to say that the triangle would have anything to do with that. But you always look for whatever leads you can. And that was one of the messages here. So the next case I went into was the case that you know very well, Marsha, the Ocean City, Maryland case, 12-058. And there we have a high strangeness case with, if not physical evidence, at least physical evidence of physical evidence. And I talked about what I knew about that case. I mean, I know you spent a lot of time with a witness. I did not do that. I spent maybe a grand total of half an hour with him. But
you worked forensics on the bag that the artist disappeared from.
I was very excited to see that torn baggie. I can't tell you how thrilling that was to see a Ziploc bag with a hole in it. A lot of this, well, the first thing you want to ask yourself, is this guy just delusional, right? Did he just take the thing out of the bag and then he's just made up a story which he believes but is completely nonsense? Well, first, as you know, we got information from other family members who were there present at the place that, yes, he had this thing that was stuck in his arm and he'd taken it out of his arm and showed it to them. So we're almost certain that thing existed at some point. And he says he put it in the bag and sealed it up, just closed the seal and left it with his other stuff overnight. And then the next morning it was gone and there was a hole in the bag. And this object by itself, it doesn't seem particularly weird. It's just a little like a wire-like object, probably less than an inch long, which he'd found embedded in his arm one night. Normally, we would just think that was just some accident because, people do dumb things and get stuff stuck in their arms, all the time. It can't all be because of aliens, right? But the fact that this object had disappeared was quite intriguing. So I said, well, can we provide some support to the fact that this guy's telling us a true story? And I think the answer is we did get that support. And that the hole in the bag would have been difficult for him to make. And it was difficult for me to replicate it. That's why I say that. And so this was, while we can't conclude really very much about what happened in real life, because we don't have enough information, we certainly can conclude that the witness's story of something unusual happening with this object and with the bag, it would have been very difficult for him to just make up. Yeah.
Burning from the inside out was inescapable.
He would have had to go to a lot of trouble to duplicate that, and it wouldn't have been easy. I mean, you couldn't just take a lighter and just hold it on the outside. I tried that, and it didn't really get the same type of damage. And so I spent a lot of time with a small microscope and this baggie, and then I bought my box of baggies and I started damaging them in different ways. And that was an exciting and interesting investigation. Again, we don't have a smoking gun conclusion, but that's not what we do. What we do is say, here's the data we have. Let's cross-correlate it with other cases, other data, see if we can find some pattern. And the problem has been that a lot of the data that are out there are not available to the research community. And so we're trying to make that happen. And we're trying to encourage people to make that happen. So one thing I did is I did briefly touch upon a case that we had last year, 2018, where we were sent what appears to be a legitimate CAT scan. and there is some kind of object on this person's skull. Now, that's kind of where I have to stop. There's a language barrier because the report is written in Russian, and there's also another barrier in that the report is a little fuzzy, a little bit out of focus. I got it as sharp as I could, and I gave it to someone who speaks Russian, and he was able to partly translate it. So we've got this partly translated medical report, which looks like a real medical report. Maybe it is. We've got a CAT scan that looks like a real CAT scan, but I have no expertise in Russian medical procedures or CAT scans. So here I am. I'm kind of stuck. I need help from someone who has more insight into these kinds of things. And this was just an illustration of how different groups could actually reinforce each other, help each other in cases. But we have to be willing to do that and not be jealous of our data, but share it. So I put this out there. I said, here's what I've got, but I redacted some of the information. But it's out there, and this was, it's fascinating if you're interested in these kinds of potential implant cases. And I don't know that that's what it really is.
That's what he purported.
Yeah, well, he purported there had been a close encounter, and more than one person experienced it, which
it was him and his father both had interactions.
Yes.
With something inexplicable.
Yes. Now there's a language barrier there. My Russian is 0. His English was better than 0, but not much. So there's a lot of things that might be misinterpreted. Obviously, the right thing to do is get somebody who speaks Russian in there doing good investigation. And I understand that people are looking into that case. I may never hear more of it again, but that's the kind of thing that in that case is just, I just briefly touched on that because I wanted to illustrate we need to help each other out. We need to work together. We don't have to have a big hierarchical organization because that adds layers of administration and layers of cost that for money we haven't got.
No. Ad hoc interaction can be surprisingly helpful and effective if you get the right people in this ad hoc group. 1, they have to volunteer. 2, they have to be specialists in the area that's going to be helpful. And then 3, they have to be open and sharing. So these ad hoc groups can be very effective if we could get them together.
Yeah. And there are 2 barriers. One you just mentioned was everybody has to be open and sharing, right? And nobody can be greedy about it or data because you get one bad actor in there and it can ruin everything. The other thing is the ethical situation. If I'm going to share data with you about a witness that might be personally identifying information, I need to know that you're as solid as I am about never sharing that with the public. And that would be, that is something where I'm not going to do that unless I have a written agreement with that person or organization. It could be an independent researcher or a small organization. So that whatever PII we get, personally identifying information, we're going to protect it just as much as API would. And because we don't release that, as you know, we never release personally identifying information. And we also do not, there are other things that are, I did go over our ethical principles briefly with this audience, just so they would know that we do abide by those and we do have them. And, number 1 is the well-being of the witness is paramount, right? If there's anything about this case that is making the witness unhealthy, either mentally or physically, we stop the investigation and we focus on getting that person the right help they need. And, we don't badger people and we don't recommend anything that might give us some pseudoscientific assurance that we are making progress in the case, but is possibly damaging them. And of course, memory regression therapy is the number 1 culprit there. That's what I wanted them to understand. And I think they did get that. And I kind of sensed a mixed reaction, but it's very hard for people to say, well, yeah, I guess the well-being of the witness is paramount. And to deny that, it really is, because we do get people who just need help, and I know you've seen cases like that, Marsha. I have too. And the help they need is not something we can supply. So we back off. And our sense of it is if the witness can tell us their story openly and honestly in a way that does not cause them emotional distress, then we can proceed.
Yeah.
And if it does cause them a lot of distress, then they need to deal with that first, and then we can talk to them. Maybe we will never talk to them. So there are hopefully a lot of things where we can, on a peer-to-peer basis, say, look, here's something I have that I can't address properly. Maybe you can address it, and we know we can trust each other, and we know that, so we can build that network of trust and mutual respect up. I would think that would be wonderful, and get away from having some big centralized thing. What we need are case files that are clean to personally identifying information, and we need them out in front of everybody. All the details of the investigation do not compromise witness privacy. That's the kind of thing that we have to do. And I think we can also peer review each other's work. Internally to API, we have a peer review system.
Correct.
And we keep trying to make that stronger and stronger. And
now you say you've got email contacts, so are you going to hit these guys back and say, you said you have some people who are very knowledgeable, and I've already sent emails saying, "Hey, nice to meet you at the conference. Hope we can see each other again," or whatever. And one nice thing about the Mysteries of Sky and Space is a lot of people there are local, so we're not far away from each other. Being a relatively small conference, pretty much mid-Atlantic audience. I'm grateful to Peter for putting that together along with some people that helped him out. The best thing about these conferences is not the speeches and presentations, but the chance to network with people who really care about the topic. You're not going to just walk down the street and find people like that. Just social media is not enough. You really need to be face to face at least once in a while. My experience of that is that the engagement level is very low. So, whereas the engagement level of conference is quite high. Hopefully we'll see an uptick in reports as a result of this, and maybe also an uptick in people listening to this podcast and people watching our videos and going to our website. So, and of course, all that is about just establishing is a core of people who really are engaged and care. That was API Director Paul Carr detailing his recent presentation at this year's Mysteries of Space and Sky conference, held annually in the Baltimore, D.C. area. His slide presentation is available to view now. Just go to our website at aerial-phenomenon.org. There you can also find links to our YouTube channel for viewing our multiple training and case file synopsis videos. Next up is lead investigator Savannah Dollison, examining some of the psychological aspects that suppress UFO witness reporting and engagement. Savannah, here's the main interesting thing. I find that I've given you a couple cases recently that they seem to be good cases. We get witness statements, and they give us a fair amount of information. They give us a contact number, and they mark in there, yes, I would like to have a field investigation. So as Chief of Investigations, I acknowledge their email and say we would like to get more information and assign a lead investigator to you. And then I never hear anything back from them. Or you get assigned and you reach out and you send an email and say, I've been assigned as the lead investigator on your case for the field investigation that you requested on our report, and you never get anything back from them. And that gets to be disappointing and frustrating, but it's probably not all that uncommon, which led you and I to discuss one time when we were having one of our on-air meetings that a little bit about what's the psychology that makes people so reticent to discuss the sighting that they admit to having had. Your research into that psychological aspect, what kinds of things did you come up with?
Well, it's a combination of things. And in general, I learned that UFO reporting is down to begin with. So since 2014, we've seen a decrease in UFO reports to organizations like ours, to MUFON and to NUFORC. But that's hard to pin down because it could be that we're just more used to seeing things in the sky like drones, and we might dismiss a UFO sighting as like, oh, well, it's probably something. I don't know what it is, but it's probably man-made or it's probably a natural occurrence. So I think technology's got something to do with maybe why reports are lower. I talked to a woman, a researcher, Sharon Hill. I emailed a few people to chat about this topic, and to first think about why are UFO reports not coming in general, because we know this year at API we've had low rates of reports, even just compared to 2018. She didn't specifically study why someone would not report a UFO, but she had some just opinions and observations about why that might be happening.
What was this lady's credentials again?
She is a researcher specializing in the interaction between science, the media, and the public. She's a skeptic and has been involved with blogs, podcasts, and other media discussing skepticism. She has a degree in sociology. She works in Pennsylvania now, I think at a university. And she specifically studied amateur paranormal investigators and how they used science. So she took a look at a group who investigates anomalous experiences and how they might use scientific jargon on their website, but aren't scientifically backing up their claims. They're just using it to look legitimate, but they're really not very experienced or professional groups. Mm-hmm. So she gave me some of the things that everybody gave me. I talked to 3 or 4 different people, and one of the common themes was that we just assume it's something man-made or natural. The more that technology and social media is out there, the more we assume things about the objects we see in the sky. Also, socially, people realize that they could be mistaken, and it becomes this thing of self-doubt. They talk themselves out of having a UFO experience. They think about it later on or talk to their friends about it or their families about it, and people say, well, no, it was probably something identifiable. They reevaluate what they've seen, and it changes the way they perceive it.
Interesting.
There's also the huge problem of the UFO stigma of feeling like maybe you're a crazy person if you talk about UFOs, and that there's a lot of debunking going on the internet and socially, even in the media, that UFOs aren't worth studying and aren't real. And so if you talk about them, then you're wacko. And that's not very helpful, but we're social people. And so we trust our friends and families, and we don't want to ruffle too many feathers. That becomes a big problem. And I think some people are just afraid. They've had this experience that's affected their worldview, and it becomes difficult to talk about. There's also a gentleman, Mark Roediger, who we've had in one of our API conversations. He was in Conversation 7. He's with the Center for UFO Studies. He's directed me to a paper by a sociologist named Ron Westrom. The paper is called Social Intelligence About Anomalies, the Case of UFOs. And it backs up the idea that some people who are having a UFO experience may not even qualify it as a UFO experience and therefore don't file a report. They talk to people and it changes their perception of what they saw.
So their opinions are actually influenced by those around them, and they don't trust that what they did see was a legitimate UFO.
Exactly. I told you in an email that I was looking into this and also comparing it to like crime reports and victimization, the psychology of that, because there's a lot of data on why people file criminal reports and a lot of studies of witnesses of crimes. So I wanted to look into the psychology of that because it seemed just like a really good source of data about why people might file a report. And one of the important things to remember is that filing a report is a help-seeking behavior. And there's pros and there's cons to that. So we might, on the pro side, get answers about what we saw, which seems to be a huge motivator. Mark Rodiger, that was one of the things that he talked about, was that we want to get validation. That's like one of the number one reasons that we file a report, is just to validate our feelings or validate our experience with somebody who will understand and listen to us. So we might get answers about what we saw, but there's also like a good civilian aspect to it. Like you're contributing to this UFO data, or you've reported something strange and you think it's your responsibility to tell somebody. But then we forget about it. We say, my number one reason for reporting this UFO was simply to report it. I don't need to know what it was. I don't want to talk to an investigator. I don't want to spend the time on this. I've done my duty and I'm good. And that's when people fall off of our radar, is they did what they came to do.
That pretty much does track with what we've been seeing. So it's kind of a case of they're saying, I saw this thing, and for mankind, I wrote it up and reported it, but don't bother me with the details because I just don't think I can unpack it.
Exactly. And people also don't want to be wrong. So people have like ideas about what a UFO is and is not. And we've run into that many times when you're working with a witness who's decided already what they've seen and they can't be talked out of it one way or the other. So part of the psychology is that if I continue to talk about this with this investigator, it might devalue my experience, or they might feel like it's not as grand or exciting because it was just a weather balloon. It loses some of the specialness of that experience, and they don't want to be wrong or to lose out on that excitement. Maybe they don't trust investigators to do a good job, or to further their own personal biases and agendas.
Wow. Well, that seems then that the human psychology is kind of set up to protect itself in a way. And so you kind of wonder how those who are investigative bodies for paranormal and anomalous and UFO sightings and stuff like that, it almost seems like an insurmountable goal to try to fight past all that ingrained psychology of the human behavior. I wish there'd be some way that you could navigate that.
But after looking at all the reasons why somebody might not file a report to begin with, or to start filing a report and get frightened away, or decide not to remain in contact, I kind of came up with a list of things of what we can do and what we can continue to do. First up is reducing the stigma of UFOs, which is somewhat difficult because, like sociologist Ron Westrom, the writer of the paper that I was sent a link to, he points out in his paper that when we dismiss interest in UFOs, it becomes so normalized that anyone who tries to study it is branded as crazy. Scientists can't look at it without having professional consequences. That's a big deal. But one of the things that we do, and even the military does, is using new terminology like aerial phenomenon instead of UFO, because there's such a stigma tied to UFOs already that we can use new terminology to kind of distance ourselves from any assumptions about what we're seeing. It doesn't have to be an alien for it to be interesting, for it to be worth studying. So there's this wonderful term, aerial phenomenon. That's us. And then Ron Westrom in his paper, he starts off right off the bat saying, I'm going to talk about UFOs, but I'm not going to call them a UFO sighting. I'm going to call them a UFO experience. And that people who have had UFO experiences is sort of changes the way that we think about it. Because even if we use the word flying from UFO, flying can imply some kind of propulsion. And that already tells you right off the bat that there's something that created it. There's like an intelligence there. All these things are super important, and we can sort of take apart all these things and put them back together in a healthier way, in a more scientific way to look at them. We do scientific training, and that's super important, like all the videos that we put up, evidence-based investigations, and keeping our own personal opinions out of investigations, not going into it trying to prove or disprove anything, but to just find out what exactly happened, find out the truth of what happened. Being trustworthy, super important. No agenda other than the truth, and compiling good data. And that's so important. Never releasing the identity of a witness. Being professional. I spoke with Chris Rutkowski, the Canadian science writer, educator, and consultant for the Winnipeg Paranormal Group. He's been writing about UFOs since the 1970s. And he says that one of the reasons that they lose communication with witnesses is the investigator came on too strong, or seemed the opposite. They seemed like they were disinterested. And to be careful about how we interact with our witnesses from the first contact when they file a form, how we respond to them, being sincere, but not coming on too strong. That's like all these things that you learn as you go, and it really just takes practice and good training. But it's like everybody makes mistakes, and there's no like perfect way to handle it, and it's already a touchy topic.
Yeah, it is really a learn as you go. I mean, there's not many people that start out being fully trained in every aspect of human behavior and psychology and the scientific method and physics and biology and astrophysics. And you just don't have that. It's people who start getting together in groups and trying to figure out a good way to go forward and try not to screw it up too much.
That's right. And you know, putting all these ideas together, a lot of it's just conjecture, but we can certainly try and put things into practice and get better as we go. And we can also try to make it easier, because really one of the things that stuck out to me most about the psychology of all of this is that whether it's reporting a UFO, another paranormal experience like a ghost sighting, or even something like rock solid that is more tangible, like reporting crimes to the police or authorities, what people do first and foremost is decide, does this benefit me? What are the pros and cons? It's a cost-benefit analysis right off the bat. And so it's important that we make like our website and our forums easy to report UFOs. Like, we have a hotline that's open 24 hours. You can leave a message, and we have our website. But we have to ask ourselves if that is enough. Are we making it easy and an easy and comfortable experience for people that are already on the fence about reporting, who already see the cons the costs of reporting adding up quicker than the benefits of them.
Yeah, I would say probably one of the things that mitigates problems with the witness making an initial report is anonymity.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And we're definitely extra careful about that with APIs. So
This is pretty interesting. I'm going to read that paper. We'll include that link.
I think some of the best things about it is that it cites several studies by Gallup polls and I think the University of Colorado about the demographics of witnesses. And it's not at all what we as a society have made it out to be. These aren't hicks and who just see something in the sky and they don't know what it is. These are ordinary people, usually in the middle of an ordinary task. You know, these aren't like social deviants, they're just regular people. And in fact, there's like a correlation between like the higher education level that you have, the more likely you are to have reported a UFO. So it's just important to pick apart that stigma of who it is that sees a UFO. And that paper has a lot to say about that. So check it out. It's one of the most important things about it, I think, is just taking a look at who these people are. They're just like us. They're everyday people.
Well, that's all very interesting, Savannah. Thank you for doing that research. I learned a lot of new things there, and hopefully the audience did too. Like you were saying, we're always learning, and we'll try to all get a little smarter on that subject, and maybe those of us who are interested in adding to the database of interesting human experiences with other than known will keep adding to it and try to figure out a little bit of what this phenomena is all about. But it takes witnesses being forthcoming to do that. Information on Savannah Dollison's research into the psychology of witness reporting and engagement can be found in our show notes for this episode. And that brings us to the end of episode 15 of API Case Files. I've been your host, Marsha Barnhart, and I was joined by my colleagues, API Director Paul Carr and Lead Investigator Savannah Dollison. This podcast is a production of Aerial Phenomenon Investigations. Links in the show note for this episode can be found at apicasefiles.com. The spoken content of API Case Files is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 4.0 license. All music heard on this podcast is licensed under Creative Commons. This free use with attribution music is deeply appreciated, and we thank the musicians and songwriters for sharing their creative spirit. Featured during this episode was music by Ketsa, Professor Cleek, Karaoke Mouse, and Solar Flare. Our intro theme music is a mashup of Alien Chronicler and Box Cat games, and DJ Spooky provides our outro theme music. Visit our website at aerial-phenomenon.org and find out more about our organization. You can make a UFO report at this site. Just fill out the form provided as completely as you can, and that will generate a report. You can also make a UFO report to us at www.reportaufo.org. Meanwhile, thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this show, and we hope you recommend API Case Files and our companion podcast series API Conversations to your friends and acquaintances.
This is API Case File Series 4.